How's everybody doing? There we go. How's everyone doing? Good to be with you. Got it going? We have determined that there is enough room in this pool for every single one of us. So we'll talk for a little bit, then we'll have a swim and have some real fun, okay? We need it. And this is some of the warmest weather we've encountered. We've been on the road for a very long time. We've been traveling más o menos since November 15th of last year. And it's been cold, it's been windy, it's been raining, it's been snowing. We've run into some hail along the ways. This is one of the most beautiful days, one of the greatest skies that we've been under since, and no accident that it's here in Nacogdoches. So we want to thank you for welcoming us. We are grateful for what you did with the weather. And Nayeli, thank you for the introduction. Nayeli met with me in 2017. It's hard to believe it was more than 5 years ago, really, where she and I had a chance to sit down. And she was really my introduction to your community and understanding what drives this part of Texas, this part of the world for that matter, and what we can do to make it better. And we've been having this conversation ongoing for every year since then. We were back here, I think, in June, where I got to meet Reverend Miller, who introduced me to some really amazing people and actually insisted that we come here to the Fredonia Hotel today, helped us to scout the location and determine how many bodies could fit in that pool. Mike Strong, who is here every single time we've been here. Mike Strong, who gave me the Axum Jacks hat. Thank you, Mike. Do we have Ms. Williams, the president of the NAACP here in Nacogdoches? I thought I saw her earlier. She's right here. Thank you so much for being here as well. Great team here. Folks, we just drove in from Crockett, Texas. Some of you have been to Crockett, Texas, and are from Crockett, Texas, and know what I'm talking about. If I asked the people in El Paso, Texas about Crockett, Texas, they wouldn't be able to find it on a map. And I wouldn't have either until we started to travel this state, showing up everywhere, writing nobody off, taking nobody for granted, making sure that we understand how we're going to bring this deeply divided, highly fractured place back together again. Not on those issues that divide us and separate us and pit us against one another, but on those things that can bring us together. And in Crockett today, we talked about the ability to see a doctor, something that we may take for granted in our lives here in Nacogdoches, that I certainly do in my hometown of El Paso. As I was entering that town hall or that roundtable meeting in Crockett, I got a call from my youngest sister. She said, "Hey, Mom is in the hospital." You know, if you get a call, your mom's in the hospital, immediately call, check on my mom. Her temperature's a little bit higher than we want it to be. She's had this pain that she can't explain. She was in the ER waiting to see a doctor. So grateful that my sister was there with her, that she had a hospital that she could go to. When I was listening to people in Crockett and folks who came in from Liberty and other parts of rural Texas, they were sharing with me what it's like when you can't go to the hospital, when you have to drive hundreds of miles or many hours just to see a provider or a specialist for your kid, or what it's like if you cannot get mental health care help, if you have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression. I was looking at the statistics before the meeting today in Crockett, and mental health care access is lower in East Texas than it is in almost any other part of the state. Mental health care outcomes are worse in East Texas than they are in almost any other part of the state. In fact, I was in Lufkin back in 2018. The first time I heard somebody say this, I've heard it so many times since then. Someone came to a town hall like this and they said, "Beto, I want you to know that my brother gets arrested on purpose so that he can go to jail. It's the one place that he can be taken care of. He is schizophrenic, uninsured. His only chance at getting prescribed a psychotropic medication when he needs it is to be under the care of law enforcement. And this is what this guy has to do to get help." We know others who buy drugs off the streets to treat themselves, others who are not with us anymore. And it's hard for us to talk about, but we must acknowledge it and confront it and face it, or we're not going to change it. This is the kicker for me. It's not like this happened to us, or just happens to be our fate if we live in East Texas or in a rural community. Over the last 10 years, we have rejected the expansion of Medicaid in the state of Texas. And what that's meant is that there's $100 billion, not imaginary, but real, your tax dollars and my tax dollars that we paid into the federal government through income taxes that are sitting there, or more likely than not, going to other states for their Medicaid expansion programs and not coming to Texas. And what that means is that today we're the least insured state in the United States of America. People are regularly dying of diabetes, of the flu, of curable cancers in this state for no other reason than they don't have insurance, cannot see a doctor, nor can they fill a prescription. This is the 9th largest economy on the face of the planet, and we're within the wealthiest country that the world has ever known. It is not for lack of resources, it is for lack of political will to do the right thing. And I'll tell you this, we know that when that uninsured person who has schizophrenia or diabetes or a cancer that has gone untreated finally can bear it no longer and either gets arrested on purpose or takes themselves to an emergency room, their outcomes are not going to be as good because they have delayed and functionally denied care for so long. It's going to be a whole hell of a lot more expensive to treat that person because it's not as easy to take care of them now that the condition has persisted and expanded and metastasized over the months or years that they went without the ability to see a doctor. But when that bill comes due, it's $30,000, it's $130,000, it's 6 figures, they're in no way able to pay for it. But it's not like that bill goes uncollected. You and I, as property taxpayers, will see that on our hospital district bill. You and I who are lucky enough, and that's all we are as far as I'm concerned, lucky enough to have health insurance, we'll see it in higher rates that we pay. If they try to tell you that expanding Medicaid and ensuring that more people are insured is expensive, you tell them it may be, but it's a lot less expensive than not expanding Medicaid and not ensuring that people can see a doctor. We should be able to get this done, right? And it's not something that Democrats are excited about. It's not something that Republicans are excited about. It's not an issue for independents. This is all of us across the state of Texas. They introduced a bill to expand Medicaid the last legislative session. There were Republicans who were ready to vote for this. Republican business groups who were supporting it, probably because of that property tax element that I just described. There was broad bipartisan support to do the right thing, to bring this state together. But for some reason, our current governor, and I honestly don't know the reason why, wouldn't let this pass, stood in the way, and was more interested in the issues that divide us and pit us against one another, like this idea that no woman in the state of Texas can be trusted to make her own medical decisions, to her own reproductive health care decisions, to decide her future, her own fate, her fortune. Y además, there's a $10,000 bounty on the back of any person who assists any woman in the state of Texas in making these decisions. Somebody just said it's crazy. We could not have imagined it. We wouldn't have been able to dream this up in our worst nightmares just a couple of years ago. It is our reality today. And you almost saw that on the face of the governor when he was at the bill signing ceremony. And he's asked by a reporter, Governor, you understand this bill you're signing that outlaws abortion in Texas makes no exception for rape or incest. And the governor, with looking like a deer caught in the headlights, he says, well, we're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. Actually, when you look at the facts and the figures and you listen to the extraordinary men and women who serve in law enforcement in this state, the clearance rate for rape and murder and violent crimes in the state of Texas has actually declined since this guy's been in office. It started at 70%. It's now down to 50%. If you know of a loved one in your life who has experienced this kind of violent crime, if someone has been taken from you by a violent criminal, not having that closure, not having that justice or that accountability at the end of the day, that wears on you and it stays with you until we close that loop. It's not happening under this guy because he's not focusing on the things that we want him to focus on. This pursuit, this fixation on transgender children, as though they are the existential threat to the future of the state of Texas. when in our schools, 7 out of 10 fourth graders cannot read at grade level in the state of Texas today. That is worse than any one of our peer states. Look at Florida and California, New York, Virginia, North Carolina, Illinois. They are eating our lunch, ladies and gentlemen. And we're graduating young people who are not career ready and college ready in this state. Not that our kids are any less smart than the kids in those other places. Certainly not because of our teachers, who very often are working 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. They didn't get into this for the glory or the pay or the fame. They did it to try to take care of those kids. But we were looking at the numbers for Nacogdoches. In Texas, a Texas school teacher on average is underpaid by about $7,500 a year against the average school teacher in this country. But in East Texas and in this county, it is closer to $15,000 a year underpaid against the average. So you're underpaid against the state average is underpaid against the national average. Very hard to keep quality educators in our schools when they can go to Dallas or Houston or Chicago or New York for that matter and be paid a real wage, something closer to approximating their true worth and value. Now again, one may say, well, Beto, if we paid every teacher in Texas that additional amount, that's going to be expensive. But you know what? 1/3 of teachers in this state leave the profession in the first 5 years. We pay to train them, to educate them, to pay them when they're in the classroom, and then we lose them and have to go out there and rehire again. And in addition, right now, after 2 years of the pandemic, and a governor who's attacking librarians and counselors and teachers in the classroom, deciding what version of history they should or should not be allowed to teach, asking them to turn in the parents of transgender kids in their classroom, 2/3 of Texas teachers are thinking about leaving the profession right now. Now look, speaking of teaching, I may not be the best math student, but 1/3 of teachers leaving within the first 5 years, 2/3 of teachers thinking about leaving this year. That adds up to almost no teachers left in the state of Texas unless we change course right now. So here's one of these big unifying ideas I want to lay on you right now. What if we paid teachers their true value here in the state of Texas? What if we respected them enough to cancel the STAR test this year so they didn't have to focus on high stakes, high pressure tests? What if we acknowledge that retired teachers have not had a cost of living adjustment since 2004 and paid them as prices at the gas pump go up, medication goes up, everything you buy at the grocery store is going up right now, and yet they have not seen any improvement in their income, which is fixed, by the way, since the year 2004. Think about how long ago that was. It's hard for most of us to remember, and that's what they're living on here today. If we expect the best and brightest to enter this profession, they're going to be looking at their parents and grandparents to see how they've been treated. And the heartbreaker that you've heard, and I hear everywhere I go in Texas from current teachers is, I'm telling my son and my daughter, do not dare enter this profession right now. That's not right. We've got to change that. And it was within our power to do that. We just have to decide that we're going to focus on the big things, the unifying things, the things that bring us together, like world-class public schools. Last idea that I want to drop. We have an economy that is creating jobs, a lot of jobs. We're grateful for that. But when we look at the kinds of jobs that we're creating right now, we see that 4 out of 10 working Texans do not make a living wage. Now, what does that mean? It's a term of art. It gets thrown around in city council meetings and legislatures. But what it means when I ask those who are not earning that living wage is that they too are working a second or a third job. They're on public assistance, which means that we're subsidizing those jobs and those employers through our tax dollars. They're sleeping in shelters in some cases or out on the streets if they're not lucky enough to find one. This, in this country, in this year, that we're treating people in this way is not right. $7.25 an hour is the minimum wage today in Texas. Because we don't have universal all-day preschool, you're losing $9 billion a year to the Texas economy from moms and dads who cannot find childcare for that 3-year-old and that 4-year-old. So they stay at home with them, not working a job, not finishing their education, not starting a business and hiring other people here in Nacogdoches. What if we raised the minimum wage? What if we had all-day pre-K for every Texan, regardless of zip code or income? What if we made sure that if you wanted to take time off as my sister did today for my mom at the hospital. You could do so without being penalized or losing your job or losing a paycheck. What if, and this is going to sound crazy to about half of the people here, but what if we paid women exactly what men make for doing the same job at the same value? Big boost to the Texas economy. And lastly on this point, we are creating jobs, and some of those jobs are high skill and high wage and high value. But I probably don't have to tell you this, we end up importing a lot of the people who work those jobs. The person who comes to this state, to Nacogdoches, to this community, from another state or another country, is twice as likely to have post-secondary education. So they have that certification to be a welder already. They have that bachelor's degree or associate's degree. They have graduate education. They're twice as likely to have that as the people here in this state. So the highest paid jobs that we're creating are going to people who are not even from Texas in the first place. We want great jobs in Texas, and we want them to go to Texans. And you see now how all of these things are connected. If I want you to get a great education, you've got to be healthy enough and well enough to pursue it. If I want you to be able to compete for one of those high-paying living wage jobs, you got to have that education that's going to allow you to compete for it. If we want you to have that education, we're going to have to treat those teachers with the respect that they've earned and is their due. We do these things, and I'll tell you what, we get Texas back on the right track. And again, you have not heard a fringe extremist, crazy idea in the lot of everything that I've laid on you, with the exception of the fact that we all get in the swimming pool at the end of this speech. But except for that, we're talking about the best jobs in America created right here, world-class public schools, regardless of our kids' zip codes, and expanding Medicaid, which almost every other state has done, including every border state. Arkansas did it with a Republican governor. Louisiana did it with a Republican governor. Oklahoma did it with a Republican governor. New Mexico, the same. We are the outlier right now. How crazy is it that some of our fellow Texans cross the border? Where I live, they go from El Paso to Ciudad Juarez to buy medication, to see a doctor, to go to the dentist. Or if you're in Texarkana, a little bit further north and east of us, they go across the border to that state to get medical care right now. Doesn't make any sense, right? If we're going to do these things, great jobs, world-class schools, being able to see a doctor, we've got to get past this moment that we're in, this crazy fever dream that describes the last legislative session, when on top of all the crazy ideas that I just described on reproductive health care, on transgender kids, on allowing any person in this state to carry a loaded firearm in public, even though we have 4 of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history in the last 5 years in Texas, even though law enforcement denied 35,000 licenses to carry a firearm over the last 5 years in Texas because they deemed those people too dangerous to themselves or to others in the community to be allowed to walk around with a loaded gun. Every one of those 35,000 now, after the governor ignored law enforcement, turned his back on them, is locked and loaded on our streets, including tens of thousands more who never applied for a license to carry because they never would have passed the background check. They're now free to do that. While he's focusing on those things, we need to be focused on winning this election. And we've got our work cut out for us, because in addition to attacking women and kids and schools and teachers, this guy is attacking our democracy. It is tougher to vote now in the state of Texas than in any other state in the union. Did you all read this story 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? 95-year-old World War II veteran. This guy literally put his life on the line, was willing to die for our democracy, defending it against fascists half a world away, tried to vote in the Texas election and couldn't, because he couldn't match the form of ID he first used to register to vote with 70 years ago with the one that he's using today, because that's now the law of the land after last year's legislative session. The way that we overcome all of this is all of us deciding that we will do all that we can with what we have, where we are right now. That means signing up with us, BetoO'Rourke.com or BetoForTexas.com, either site. You can go on there, become a volunteer, and we'll put you to work, knocking on doors, engaging with your fellow Texans. You are under no compulsion to repeat anything that I've said here today from your own heart, in your own words. You tell your neighbors and your friends and your family members and your Republican mother-in-law why this election is so important to you and why we need a change and how we get back on track, not for Democrats and not for Republicans, but for all of us as Texans. If we do that, ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that we're going to win this. We're going to get Texas back on the right track, and we're going to be proud of what this state can accomplish. We're going to do it together. Thank you for being here. We've got another microphone, and we're going to circulate that through the group today. If you have a question, if you have a comment, a suggestion, idea, a criticism, I'm all ears. We came to listen and learn from the people of Nacogdoches. Cynthia, if you'll raise your hand so people know to get your attention. And then if anyone wants to ask a question.
All right. Here's our first question right here.
My name is Cynthia Davis. I'm from Lufkin, and I'm a retired teacher. I've been retired since 2006. And 30 years. And I have family members that didn't even go to college as long as I did, made more money than I did. I had to work 5 jobs to take care of my 2 kids because I was divorced. And that's a shame. It really is a shame. And all my brothers and sisters, some of them went to 2 years, some went, I have one that was a sister that's a nurse. She made more money than I did. I have a brother that was an engineer on the railroad. He made money, and I always bragged about it. And here I am trying to make it with 2 kids. And I'm glad we got someone can help us change all of this.
Thank you so much. And I heard a lot of people saying it, and I want to echo it. Everyone out here was saying thank you for your service and for teaching and doing it under some pretty tough conditions. So thank you. But she's saying she loved it. That's right.
All right. Here's our second question right here.
Hi, my name is Sue, and I work for the state of Texas. I care for the population of the most vulnerable, and I hear you about health care and how we all need help. I work 40 hours a week. I work all month, right? So for the first 40 hours, I get a check of under $300. Under $300, I get 200 plus for 2 weeks. My next 2 weeks paycheck is under $1,000. So for what is it, 80 and 80, 160 hours a month working graveyard, I'm getting paid like $1,300 a month. And that's because I want to have insurance for my family of 3. So they take away the deductions, all the deductions. At the end, that's what I make net. And it's frustrating. It is, it's scary. And I mean, we can do better. We can do better. How can somebody work graveyard 180 hours a month and make $1,300?
So what she just said, something that faces
It's for the state of Texas, too.
faces a lot of families. You know, we've been sold a bill of goods on this Affordable Care Act, and it's not there for us. It's not there for a lot of people. I'm uninsured. My family's uninsured. So why are we still talking about health care? I thought we fixed this. That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Why are we still talking about it?
Yeah. You're right. When we declined to expand Medicaid in the state of Texas, there were many people who earned too much for the current Medicaid standard in the state, but not enough to be eligible for the subsidies from the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And nowhere more so than here in the state of Texas. So you're absolutely right. We did not fix it. It is not fixed today in the state of Texas. It's actually worse here than it is anywhere else. And expanding Medicaid would be the single greatest step we could take towards ultimately fixing it. You'd bring more than 1 million people onto the rolls, able to see a doctor. But to be honest, that still would not address all of our outstanding health care issues. But let's at least take that step.
If you don't mind, I'd like to expand upon it a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Please.
I tried to sign up, you know, how they tell you go online and sign up. And I was quoted $3,416 a month for insurance. I can't do that.
With no subsidy, it sounds like.
No, no subsidy.
Yeah.
No, none at all. And I'll be honest with you, I don't have much faith in in any kind of politician anymore. They say a lot. You know, it's a game of show and tell. They tell you everything, but they show you nothing. And I'm tired of listening to, I don't know, people who talk the side of their mouth, say one thing and then do another. It just seems like everybody and everybody, once they get elected, they never come through. And I don't want to bankrupt the country. I don't want to hurt other people, you know, working families. I mean, it's $4 gas, $5 diesel, houses. You guys see what's going on in our community. Prices are all up, energy's up, everything's up. What are we going to do? And I just see it as we got to get better jobs in this community.
You're right.
You know, and the biggest employers probably, I think, Walmart and Pilgrim's Pride. Right? So what's wrong with bringing high tech here? We've got a university. They have access. Why has everything got to go to Austin, got to go to Dallas, got to go to Houston? Are the best applicants there? I don't think so.
I'm with you. I was just talking to your mayor pro tem. I don't know if he is still here, but I said, what's your biggest challenge here in Nacogdoches? And he said exactly what you did. He said, you know, we graduate all these extraordinary young people from SFA, and then almost not a single one of them stays here. They go off to other places. What if we could keep all this talent in this community, and they're the ones driving the job creation? High tech, high skill, high value, whatever you want to call it, it really should be Nacogdoches is for the taking. And so he said that the city council just invested in a major plan to make this community more livable for these young people, more attractive for them. What if we had a partner in the governor's office who was willing to meet this community halfway and do that? And on your earlier point, I hear you. I'll just tell you this. I was in Congress for 6 years. Every one of those years on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. Honor of my life to serve those veterans. When I got in, El Paso was 148th out of 148 mental health care VA centers. We had the worst wait times in the nation. I made that my number one focus. We were able to turn it around, build a new PTSD behavioral health center on the campus of University Medical Center in El Paso, rewrite the business plan for the VA, and get stuff signed into law, not by President Barack Obama, but by President Donald J. Trump. I don't agree with the guy on much, but we could find enough common ground for veterans to move forward. So I'll tell you, I'll work with anyone, anytime, anywhere to advance the agenda of this state. I'm so grateful that you're here. Would love to work with you too.
Okay, here's our next question.
Hi, I've worked in healthcare for the past 20 years, in mental health care for the past 3. 2 of those were at Rusk State Hospital. It's a shame. Mental health care has such a stigma. Nobody wants to talk about it, but 75% of us need it. What are we going to do to help the people who unfortunately are stuck in the state hospitals or are clients of the Burke Center, which serves 12 counties in East Texas, but has 13 counties in East Texas and is understaffed and underfunded?
So many of us, maybe most of us here, would be compelled just from your story and from the moral imperative of this. You got to do the right thing. You got the resource to do it. Help somebody who's struggling right now, right? But if that's not persuasive, and thus far it has not been in Texas, right? We've known about this for forever, and it has only gotten worse. The largest provider of mental health care services today is the county jail system. The largest single inpatient mental health care facility in the great state of Texas of 30 million people is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. So if that doesn't shock you into doing the right thing, what will? I think we come back to the gentleman's point about we don't want to bankrupt this state. We don't want to pay more in taxes to approach the same problem in the same way and expect a different result. That's Einstein's definition of insanity. What if we could acknowledge that housing somebody for mental health care issues at the county jail is really expensive? I forget what it costs, or I remember what it costs then. I don't know what it costs now. It was $120 3 years ago per night to house somebody and to feed them and to clothe them and keep a roof over their head, it gets a lot more expensive when you start to administer psychotropic medication. For a fraction of that, we can ensure that that person has insurance, that there are more payers in the mix. That attracts more mental health care professionals and providers to our communities, more facilities that aren't jails and prisons where we can administer and deliver that care. That would be a great start. But at some point, you're going to need the moral leadership in the state of Texas to do the right thing just because it is the right thing. And I will make sure that we find as much common ground with the Republicans on this as we can, whether it's the cost issue, the stewardship of taxpayer resources and spending them in hospitals instead of jails, whatever it takes, let's get there. Because you're right, it's going to affect so many people. Everyone here, someone in their family, if not themselves, is going to need that mental health care help at some point in their lives. Let's make sure it's available to all of us. Thanks for asking the question. Thanks for what you do. We appreciate it.
To your right.
Hi there, I'm Christina Putnam, and I'm mainly concerned about what our current governor and lieutenant governor have done to the rights of women in the state of Texas and our educational system. I'm mainly concerned because I remember a statistic about charter schools in the state of Texas. I believe 198 have failed since we started that project. And I hope that we put more interest, energy, money, and focus on public education. And I would like to hear what you had to say, Beto.
Great. On this first point that you raised on the rights of women, you know, we talked about reproductive rights, but let's also acknowledge that this is taking place in a state where we are at an epicenter for maternal mortality. In fact, I was just at a barbershop down the street, and I had a chance to meet a gentleman, and I asked him, you know, how he came here. He said he moved with his wife, and that she died a day after they delivered their child. Maternal mortality is bad in Texas. It's worse here than almost anywhere else in the developed world. It's 3 times as bad for black women in this state. So when you close down family planning clinics, yes, it is harder to get an abortion. It's also harder to get a cervical cancer screening or reproductive health care help of any kind, or the ability to see a doctor at all in the least insured state in the country. So when we say this is an attack on women, this is really an attack on women. It is life or death in the state of Texas right now. That's why as governor, I'm going to overturn SB 8, and we're going to trust every woman to make their own decisions with their own body and health care and future every time. On this second issue of public education, you're so right. We have given free license to those who are not as accountable as the traditional public school system. And in many instances, we've drained resources, or at least the governor is threatening to drain resources from traditional public schools, and under the guise of quote-unquote choice, turn your tax dollars into vouchers and send them even to private schools. Now, that's one thing in Nacogdoches, it's one thing in El Paso. It's quite another thing in these smaller rural counties where there is no private school. So they'll take your public tax dollars out of your public school classroom and send it to a private school in some other part of the state. That is insult to injustice and injury, and it's proposed by the current governor. You know as well as I that in some of these smaller communities, the public school is the largest employer. It is the source of pride in the community. It is the best ticket to a better life for those kids in those classrooms and those teachers who may be working 2 or 3 or 5 other jobs in order to make ends meet. They're giving everything of themselves to those kids. So at a minimum, we should have their backs and fully fund public ed. As governor, I'll do that. Thanks for asking.
All right, here's our next question.
Hi, my name is Courtney Roberts, and I'm a senior here at Nacogdoches High School. And I actually asked you a question right before I entered my freshman year of high school, so that's crazy. Yeah. I'm going to be attending Texas Southern University in the fall, and I wanted to ask, what is your viewpoint on funding HBCUs in Texas? Because across Texas, across the nation, there's plenty of historical black colleges that are underfunded. Staff is underpaid. There's not many resources. I just want to know, like, what is your viewpoint on that, and what is your plan to combat that?
First of all, I think that is crazy that you asked me a question 4 years ago, and you're back asking me a question again as you head off to TSU. Congratulations. It's a great, great school. I think we begin with the understanding that HBCUs are incredibly important to this state and offer us tremendous value. for the money that we put in, the state tax dollars that go into HBCUs, which are less than we do for UT and Texas A&M and SFA, for example. They provide, in terms of graduation and earning power of those graduates and what comes back from those graduates, the good that they create, it outpaces almost anything we have in higher ed. So I want to make the case that this is a smart investment to begin with. Then we look at some of the leadership that these HBCUs have produced. Not too far up the road in Marshall, Texas at Wiley, you have people like James Farmer. You have people like Opal Lee, who recently made Juneteenth a national holiday. You have people like Dr. Lawrence Nixon, who graduated from there more than a century ago, founded the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas in 1910. And when the state legislature in 23 outlawed voting for black men and women in this state, and it wasn't under a euphemism, it literally in black and white said that if you're African American, you cannot vote in a Texas election. It was a graduate of Wiley in El Paso, Texas, Dr. Lawrence Nixon, who broke the all-white Democratic primary in 1944. So the impact that these institutions have on the state is beyond calculation. So I want to make sure that as governor there is parity in funding, which is missing today, for the value that we get, for the pride that we have in these institutions, and so that cost is not a barrier for you or anyone else, anyone who's graduating behind you at the high school that you attend, when they want to go to TSU or Paul Quinn College or Wiley or Prairie View A&M or any of our great institutions that we have here in the state of Texas. So I'm proud of what they're doing, and I want to make sure that is followed up by investment and resources. Congratulations on going there, and thank you again for coming out. Appreciate it.
All right, we're here to your left.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Carlton Teal from Lufkin. I just have a simple question. We look, well, I grew up and I was born and raised in Lufkin, served in the military, 2 wars, 2 Bronze Stars.
Wow.
I just want you to, I have a question because I'm kind of struggling with the whole situation here that we have in Texas. We have an economy that, since I've been born, has suppressed the black, Hispanic, people of color throughout the generations. In education, healthcare, jobs, economic, you name it, across the board. What is your stance when we talk about repeating history? Are we going to continue to repeat this history, or are we going to commit to changing these things? What is your stance on those social and economic differences?
Yeah, Carlton.
Can you repeat the question for those in the back?
Sure. First of all, this gentleman just told us that he served his country in uniform and has earned 2 Bronze Stars. So that's one thing I want to make sure that I repeat. Thank you for your service and for sharing that with us. And the question is about whether or not we're going to repeat our history, and an acknowledgement that this state has not worked equally for everyone within it. And it's not something that I'm talking about from our distant past, as I just did with the all-white primary from 1923 to 1944. It's that today in a kindergarten classroom in Texas, a black child is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled as a white kid for the same infraction in front of the same teacher. Now, when we hear about a schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline, it doesn't begin in high school. It's a very real thing. It begins when that kid is 4 or 5 years old. They're absolutely defenseless against this system. And I don't for a second think that the teacher in front of that kid does this intentionally. I don't think any of us want this system to exist. But if we acknowledge its presence, then we are more likely to be able to overcome it and change it. So how do we meet a challenge like that? What if we more intentionally and actively sought out black men to be those kindergarten teachers, to be at the front of the classroom? What if we made sure there was representation in every part of education, pre-K through 12? That would go a long way. What if we looked at the issue of economic access and the ability to get a loan, and the compounding effect of redlining going back to the 1940s and 1950s after World War II that is still with us? Access to capital in this state is not equal. And so it makes it harder for some to start businesses and create jobs and build intergenerational wealth. It doesn't mean we got to punish anybody for that. We just have to acknowledge that it's happened and be intentional about the way that we make sure that folks who are trying to start a business and need a loan have access to that, no matter who they are or which community that they live in. So yes, I think beginning with an acknowledgement of the truth and the fact that this isn't just our history, it is our present today, and it will be our future unless and until we change course is essential. And then having the policies that follow that in education, in lending, in hiring, in the ability to have a state government that looks like and is reflective of the state that it seeks to govern. We're the most diverse state in the country, or maybe second only to California. Let's see that in positions of leadership and power and public trust. So thank you, Carlton, for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, here's our next question.
Yes.
Hello, so I'm in 8th grade right now, and I go to school in Hudson, Texas, which is like even more rural than here. And I am one of the only Democrats in my town, and I am one of the only people that wears a mask or is vaccinated at all. So, but because of this, I go to school with a constant fear in my head that I'm either going to hurt myself or my family because of this pandemic, and I don't want to hurt anybody. And I also feel for my friends who aren't allowed to wear masks or be vaccinated because of their parents. And I feel for them, and you know, even if they do get COVID and they recover, what's going to happen when they get older, because we don't know the long-term effects. And just today, my friend, her mask broke and she couldn't get a mask. She had to go 2 periods before she could see me, and I had a mask for her. But the fact that she had to go unprotected because no teachers, not even the principal, not the front office, nobody had a mask for her. And that's not fair. That's not safe. And then another point, I'm a straight A student. I take all advanced courses. But I have a 504 plan. I have ADHD and dysgraphia. And I have to take the STAR test in 9 weeks now. But because of the new rule, it's all on computers. I can't take a test on a computer and expect to do as well. And that's not fair if my disability isn't recognized and treated like that. It's not fair, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, because how am I supposed to take a test, you know, get my dream job, work for NASA, go to Harvard, all that, when I can't even pass a stupid test in 8th grade? And then my final point is, because I have ADHD, I do take Ritalin. But we've recently moved here like 2 years ago, and it was so difficult to be able to get my medication, and my father's too. I think I ended up having to take expired medication from 2 years ago because we couldn't get approval from my insurance to have my Ritalin, which is not an ideal situation. I struggled so much during my first portion after just moving here, after doing, I think I did virtual school for about 9 weeks. I couldn't take my own medication that I need to function because of all these restrictions put on drugs. Now, I do think drugs need to be restricted at some point, but not to where people that actually need them can't get their drugs, can't get their medicine. That's not fair.
Thank you for being here. And my daughter is also in 8th grade, so you all are roughly the same age. You're in the same place in life right now, and so I'm really impressed that you're here. And I can only imagine the courage that took to come out and to share that in front of everybody, most of whom you don't know. And so we're proud of you for doing that. You know, what you just shared with all of us reminds us that this pandemic was really hard, right? And hard on you, hard on your classmates, whether they wear masks or vaccinated or not. I mean, we all went through a lot of isolation and separation, a lot of learning loss. You know, in some cases, you may not have been in the classroom for 1 or 2 years, but it may have resulted in much longer learning loss than that. That's what I'm hearing from teachers. The ground that they have to make up, and then to have a high-stakes, high-pressure test still be out there this year. And however they try to discount it, it's still causing anxiety. I can hear it in your voice. It causes anxiety for those teachers. It causes anxiety for the parents of those kids who are there. I don't think any of us are against testing or accountability or understanding how we're doing. We want to know, right? And every teacher wants to know, and every teacher that I know wants to do better. But what if instead of this high stakes, high pressure test that you're talking about, we had a test that was used more as a diagnostic that determines who needs help and where we need to send resources. Where you have a certain treatment in a classroom that's working really well, and you may want to expand it across other classrooms or other school districts across the state. What if we use those tests really to gain the knowledge that we want instead of punishing teachers and principals and school districts for their performance? Those A through F rankings that we see on schools, 100% of your grade is just that one test. When you all were in school, you may have taken a class where there was only one test and that was your entire grade. That's what we're doing to entire school districts and schools right now across the state of Texas. Nobody did this maliciously. They're not trying to harm anybody. I think this was just a good intention that got out of control. We need to get it back to some common sense. And we need to listen to you and to your teachers and to your classmates. And we need to understand how we can make sure these tests actually work for the intended purpose. So thank you for being here. Keep the faith. You know, keep your chin up. I don't think you're going to have any problem doing that. Just listening to you right now, you sound incredibly strong and courageous, and you're going to be good. And I would just say for those kids, and we deal with this as adults who don't wear masks or don't want to get vaccinated or don't see things the way that you see them, let's make sure that we are doing our best to still be good and kind to them, to find common ground where we can, to recognize that we are really fractured and divided right now. I've been around for 49 years. I'll be 50 this year, and I've never seen it like this, ever. And people who are older than I am say they've never seen it over the course of their lives. This, at some point, has to pass. But it's going to be up to you and to me and everybody here to make sure that we accelerate that passing. And by getting a change in those who lead the state of Texas, we can make sure that we replace some of this cruelty and meanness with kindness, with empathy, with just being good to each other and having some common sense. So I'm counting on you to be part of this, okay? Thank you. Thanks for being here.
All right, here's our next question.
Thank you.
Well, I sort of have a question and a comment. I'm Angela Williams. I am the NAACP president for Nacogdoches. I currently work for an employer. I'm on flag on the young guy with talking about income. I work for Texas Employment, and most of our jobs is outsourced. There is not many jobs in Texas. My daughter died on January the 13th last month. My HR person is in Wisconsin. My doctor is here. My lead is in center. So getting those people to communicate is just ridiculous. I have the ability, if I had everybody's social security number, I could pull up your income. And if you actually seen the income per quarterly that you get paid for unemployment, it would make you cry. Some people are for a quarter, $3,000 for a quarter. Who can pay bills on that? Nobody can pay bills on that. I commute. I haven't worked in Nacogdoches in over 16 years. I drive to Lufkin. I drive to Tyler. I drive to Jacksonville. There is no money in Nacogdoches. The salaries in Nacogdoches is $12 an hour. I drive to Tyler 1 hour, and I make $10 more doing the same job that I would be doing here in Nacogdoches. And that is completely ridiculous. Yeah. Will I be able to do that now with gas? Probably, because that's the sacrifice that I have to make. But outsourcing here seems to be a big problem. We all know it as the employment office who help you get jobs with the state of Texas. You go online, you put in all of your credentials, and this elaborate system is supposed to kick out jobs that match your credentials. It matched me with jobs $8 and $9 an hour. I made $8 an hour when I worked at Taco USA, and if anybody from Nacogdoches, I already know what Taco USA is. And that was back in 1989. So what can I do with $10 now? I live in Central Heights. Love it in the country, but our taxes is high. Did I hear it yet? Our taxes is high, and groceries is high. And in order for us to come from Central Heights to come into town to buy groceries, I don't buy groceries here. My daughter was living in Houston. I take coolers to Houston. I buy at H-E-B. I buy all of my groceries, everything I needed in Houston, and I come back to Nacogdoches. So that's taking revenue from Nacogdoches that could be spent here, but they're not offering us. We don't even have a mall. We got a $1.25 store. It used to be the dollar store, but now it's $1.25. We have a Ollie's. What are the stores that in there? They don't have nothing on the shelves. We don't have anything here. Nothing here. No health food. Is it a health food store still here? And it gives me anxiety to go in dirt cheap. If you go in dirt cheap, you need, what was the mental health lady? We need the mental health lady because dirt cheap is so dirty, it gives you anxiety to go through all of that stuff. So we don't have nothing in Nacogdoches. I'm talking no racetracks, nothing for our children to do. Nothing against that little Splash Town, but when I heard Splash Town, I heard town. I didn't hear little old bitty center. That Splash Town is so expensive, I don't see how anybody can even go there. So really what I'm saying, Nacogdoches is not for us. The things that used to be here for us is not for us. I remember as a little girl going out on South Street in the employment office, filling out a card. They matched me with a job. I went to work at the sheriff department. I went to work at the DA's office. I went to work at the domestic violence shelter. After that, money cut, I had to go. So my question too, how do we stop outsourcing these jobs? Because, I'm going to say this, I hope ain't nobody here for my job. There is nothing in our building that represents Texas. It's not a road runner from Angelina. It's not nothing. We are housed in a warehouse with cubicles and a desk. If an outsourcing company had an interest in us, why you don't invest in us? Why you don't give scholarships to the college? There's nothing in our building that reflects anything. You Lufkin people that's been in the Lufkin Workforce Center, sorry, that's where I'm at. It's nothing on there that resembles y'all. Nothing. Temper Inland donates money. It is nothing that represents anything. All of our stuff comes out of Texas. Even when I was working food stamps, you may live in Nacogdoches and somebody in San Antonio or Dallas or people that don't know your culture and don't know the things that go on in Nacogdoches, is what's working our stuff, and that's why we're not getting anything. Not anything. And the restaurants close down at 7 o'clock, so because they're so short-handed. So if you don't get food before 6:30, you out of it. You out of it.
Thank you. Listen, I mentioned earlier that I had a chance to briefly talk to the mayor pro tem earlier tonight, and he mentioned the plan that the city council had invested in to address exactly what you just described, that it's hard to get people to stay here because there are not options or opportunities for the folks who graduate from SFA or who grew up in Nacogdoches in the first place. What we need is a partner for the community, because there's no way that there is the tax base here alone to make that happen. You cannot do it on your own. We couldn't do it on our own in El Paso. No community in Texas can do it on its own. But there are some communities that do get the lion's share of state resources and investment and employment opportunities. And we absolutely need to spread that wealth, and it needs to come here. And listen, there's a better chance that it comes here when you have a candidate for governor who shows up here and keeps coming back here and listening to the people here. So you're going to have a partner as governor come 2023. Thank you, Angela, for that.
And I know I didn't get to everybody. I apologize if I didn't, but this is going to be our last question.
So many good ones. Thank you all. Yeah.
What is your stance on the legalization of marijuana?
You just came right out and asked it. We should legalize marijuana in the state of Texas. Folks, real quick, I'll tell you this. Almost every state in the union has either decriminalized or outright legalized marijuana. We are still putting people away behind bars for possession of a substance that's legal in most of the free world today, certainly legal in most of the United States of America. Not everyone is serving time equally. Almost all Texans use the substance at the same rate. Disproportionately black and brown Texans are stopped, frisked, locked up. Upon release, have to check a box on every employment application form saying that they have a conviction, making it less likely that they get the job. Harder to qualify for student loans at SFA if you have that conviction on your record as well. So check this out. If we legalize marijuana, which I'm going to try to do in that first year in office, we save $500 million a year from not locking up people for having weed on them. We make another $500 million a year by taxing it the same way that other states tax it. That's $1 billion to the positive. Imagine putting $1 billion more into our public schools every year. So, great question. Thank you for asking, Ms. Cano. So, Ms. Cynthia says that's the last question. We're going to hang out for a little while. If anybody wants to say hello, take a picture, post that on your social media. Let the world know that we came together tonight. Nacogdoches, thanks for having us out. Appreciate it. We'll see you in the pool.